selling addictive 24-hour candlelight vigils in TVs. Freedom will be defended at the cost of civil liberties. The viewers are glued to television screens, stuck, cause lots of things seem too sick. I use opportunities to pluck heartstrings for theme music. I show you which culture to pump your fist at, which foot is right to kiss.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Grift Show. This is Rev and Gonz. This is Gonzo. We are going to talk about this week's absolute shit show.
It's been a decade in a week.
A decade in a week.
A decade in a week, as they like to say. It has been a big week for news. It's been absolutely unhinged.
Yeah, thanks Lenin for that.
He was more prescient than he realized at the time, I think.
Yeah.
I don't even think he would have been... No. I mean, obviously, the modern world in general would have killed him.
Oh, yeah. You know.
Didn't have a constitution for this,
no,
all of this, but...
I mean, you know, he's still frozen in time in Russia, so,
it's been a wild week. We've had CEO assassinations. We've had regimes toppled. We've had meme coins explode in rug pulls that cost people their life savings.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. All right. Where do you want to begin?
So let's start small, shall we?
Okay.
Let's go with Shock to how was that supposed to be announced? Cash to a Hawk to a.
It was Hawk Coin.
Hawk Coin.
It was
okay.
Hawk Coin.
It started with a dollar sign, so I was really confounded by that.
Crypto people think they're clever when they're crypto people instead.
That's very true. So yeah, we had a big ass rug pull. So you all remember the Hawk to a girl? That was the funniest meme for like 48 hours, right? And
it was interesting to see somebody like proudly announcing they suck dick.
Yeah.
For a day.
I was very happy for her, you know.
Yeah, good for her.
Right?
The fact that she has parlayed this into a podcast and personal appearances, and now a grift of impressive magnitude.
It is impressive. So coin goes live. As she's announcing the coin is going live, this is the best part. She calls it a meme coin immediately.
Yeah.
So it gets a $500 million market cap.
In, I think it was like less than 10 minutes.
Yeah. And then she's like, and it's a meme coin. And she starts selling. A bunch of other insiders start selling.
Yeah, she bought $1 million worth instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then within 30 minutes, it started selling everything at a profit once it spiked and peaked.
That's, I mean.
And this is the sort of thing you can do in completely unregulated markets.
Yeah, I would like to point out that if you did this with any stock, you're going to prison.
You're going to prison. Instead, you just get yelled at on Twitter by dudes who put their children's entire college savings into Hawk Coin.
Hawk Coin.
Hawk Coin. I can't even barely say it.
Spit on that thing.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. So that happened. And we've seen a massive 97% drop in its value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it peaked at just under $500 million, and it troughed at like 47 million.
Wow.
Total value. So like a 90% drop.
So note to self out there, people. If you find yourself chasing somebody who is a meme, stop. Just don't do it. Don't idolize them. Don't hype them. If some human being turns into a meme, get off that train. Just don't follow. It's bad for you. All right. So now, what else do we've got? We got so much.
Bashar al-Assad.
Oh,
out in Syria.
Yeah, he's
President no more or whatever.
He is on a couch playing video games with Putin right now.
Maybe he can go back to being an optician in Moscow.
That's so. When last we looked, like 2 weeks ago, the Syrian rebellion and the civil war was at this weird grinding halt where Syria had basically, as a government, like secured most of its territories and looks like it was winning. It looked like everything was kind of just dead in the water, and it had been a long time coming. What, 2012 is when they started?
Over a decade.
Yeah. So 2012 things start, and they just ground and ground and ground. Well, Russia runs out of money, troops, and ammunition to send them, and
They've been focused elsewhere.
right.
They've spent the last 3 years fighting a 3-day war.
Yeah. 3-day special operation to take Kiev. And so, their support from Russia materially had kind of evaporated. And all of a sudden, out of kind of nowhere, all the opposition forces band together, get rid of a bunch of the extreme weirdo fringe elements that were causing the most strife, and had a coordinated 1-week counteroffensive, and they took the fucking
whole country.
Like, in a week.
And, it remains to be seen whether this is a good thing or a bad thing for the people of Syria. We don't know yet. It is very true that across the Middle East that pretty much everyone in charge of every country is terrible.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter the form of government, the religious makeup of the country, the ethnic makeup of the country. Everyone in charge of a Middle Eastern country is actively harming the people of their country.
Yeah, for the most part. And who knows what this is going to turn into? We don't have any clue. But what we do know right now is that it went from 0 to 100 real fucking fast.
Yeah, it is interesting to me that the new leader of Syria, al-Jalani, al-Jalani was a chosen name he took when he became a radical Islamist. And he has since started referring to himself as his given name, which I don't recall right now.
Right.
But he stopped using his radical Islamist fighter name. Which is interesting. It feels like he's trying to create a sense of legitimacy. And not being seen as the same sort of radical that he was seen as even 6 weeks ago.
Right. From what I have seen in this, again, all these disparate opposition groups that didn't seem to get along very well, found a way of finding common cause and getting this shit done. And we're seeing at least some hopeful signs. Again, this could all turn completely sideways a week from now, a month from now, a year from now.
By the time this goes live, the entire thing could have collapsed.
Yeah.
And that's only 2 days away.
Yeah. But in the interim, watch the space, because this could be some interesting shit. And then, so that's Syria.
That's Syria.
Bad week for Russia in general. They can't do shit to contain Ukraine, and they barely have a grip on any territory there. They're running out of money. They're running out of conscripts. The North Korean fighters that they've brought in can't seem to fight. They're running out of ammunition, fuel. Russia is a gas station, and they're running out of fuel. And now they lost their largest Middle Eastern port and ally in Syria. So,
but they've given Assad asylum, so he's got that going for him.
He does.
Until he wears out his welcome, which he probably has no control over.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we've got Romania. Kalin Gorgescu, a ultra-nationalist Putin lover, a bit of a Nazi in some ways, more than a couple. Also, big fan of Donald Trump, as per usual. Let's see. So that motherfucker apparently had a oligarch funding a TikTok campaign.
Yeah. A guy named Bogdan Bashir.
Okay. And so now their Supreme Court, that's the one that they threw out their election, right?
Yeah, the entire election was thrown out.
So
they have to do a do-over.
Now you may ask, what? How does that happen? Well, their constitution actually requires that they have free and fair elections. And
novel.
Right. And that they don't be interfered with. And so their court looked at it and said, well, I mean, 381,000 promotional paid posts and accounts. That's,
in a country with a small population.
Right. Like it's a tiny country, and their elections seem to just shift in the wrong direction at the last minute, all based on what looks like a massive influence campaign, which is directly tied to Russian intelligence.
Yeah. Which we wouldn't know anything about, but we'll get more into that in the main segment.
Yeah.
I guess one of the big news stories from this past week that we probably have to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
The assassination of Brian Thompson.
Yeah.
By, apparently, allegedly, Luigi Mangione.
God, what a name.
Fucking beautiful.
It is. All right. First things first, I want to say, quite frankly, the parasites had it coming.
It's true. I'm not thrilled that we've gotten to this point. I'm not surprised.
No.
It is what it is.
Right. Personally, I used to not be thrilled at the idea that we get to this point. As time has gone on. 10, 12 years ago, me, 30-something me, was very, stability good. Let's not be too radical, I had some radical politics and ideas, but not modalities, right? Theories of change were much more like, let's just take things slow and we'll get there, guys. Whew. But you know what? As I've watched the world, I suddenly think, some of these people have a point.
Yeah. And it's interesting that now the discourse has become people who are afraid that this is going to lead us into having single-payer healthcare in the United States.
No shit.
They're terrified of the possibility that this could be what does it. And it's interesting that that's where their first thought went.
Isn't it?
Not honestly, they don't care that anybody died. No. Nobody on the right cares that anybody died. Ever.
No.
But the general concern is that this is going to lead us into having a more equitable and functional healthcare system.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it will.
Probably not.
It probably won't. We are a very stubborn country. Americans are weirdly intractable when it comes to single-payer healthcare for reasons even independent of all of the considerations I've never understood.
Mm-hmm.
The logic has never made sense. Any complaint you can levy about a single-payer system is exponentially more true in our current system where healthcare is denied based solely on profit margins of for-profit, publicly traded corporations.
Right. The one solid argument would be that the transition would be ugly and difficult, and that would be true.
It would, and it would involve. There are probably a couple million people whose job depends on working in the healthcare insurance industry.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest industries in the country, and we would have to find something for those people to transition to, because mostly they're low-level workers who aren't the problem.
Yeah. All in all, it's actually like 6 to 8 million, and then another couple of million that just sell the products, right?
Yeah.
And so we're looking at like 10 million people that are supporting the health insurance industry all in, and that would be ugly. Another part that would be ugly, we'd have to acknowledge it. I mean, there's a little bit of fuck 'em, but, for instance, that Medicare, that shift on paying the anesthesia rates, right? The funny thing is, we've kind of viewed it as a, look, this worked, right? Public pressure worked. But you look behind the scenes, and you know who is spreading the press releases on that? The anesthesiologist lobby. Right?
Right. And anesthesiologists, I've known anesthesiologists. I worked at a hospital for 7 years. Mm-hmm. They were the best paid employees of the hospital. They all made in the mid to upper six figures a year.
Mm-hmm. And the reason that they were lobbying against it, now the funny thing is, in this case, Blue Cross Blue Shield was making an adjustment to align with the Medicare policy. That payment structure, right?
Okay.
That's actually Medicare's payment structure. So what they were doing was saying, okay, we pay for X, and if it takes longer than that, the anesthesiologist can get fucked. Right?
And having known many anesthesiologists, they can largely, in fact, get fucked.
Right.
I think out of the entire staff, I liked one of them. And what was interesting is he was the one who hated everyone else in the hospital except for me. He was the most hated employee in the entire hospital, and I was the only person who got along with him.
It's beautiful.
He used to pull me into surgeries so he could show me the mistakes the surgeons had made.
And that's why they hated him, I'm sure.
That he was not subtle or quiet.
But that's the thing to think about. It's going to be a transition to single payer would be ugly for a lot of which we would call.
It would be a several year transition.
Yeah.
It would not be quick. It would be very disruptive.
Right. And hospitals would have to find ways of realigning their financial structures, et cetera. We would have to look at a lot of different fail points, and that's a legitimate criticism.
You would probably
not
have
a
to
problem,
do it
though.
in a you'd probably have to slow walk it out where you would expand Medicare to a larger and larger portion of the population over time. Maybe do 10-year increments. First,
Right.
you include everybody who's over 55, then you move to 45, and you just move down until eventually,
Yeah.
over the course of maybe 10 years, you get everybody fully covered.
And probably work on slowly chipping away at the rest of the for-profit system in the healthcare system. Because
Right.
it's not just your insurance company. Now, they are a big fucking part of the problem, right? But your
Hospitals are part of the problem, too. I was watching a video on TikTok earlier today where a licensed dietitian who worked at a hospital for years talked about how the payment structures were set so that if a insurance company had a boutique plan that covered more and paid out at a higher rate, everybody was charged at that higher rate because the hospital didn't want to lose the money, even though almost no one had a health insurance plan that would cover at that higher rate. So if you had one health insurance plan that would say, yeah, we'll pay a licensed dietitian $650 an hour,
right.
even though the average was $100 an hour, every hospital in that region was going to charge $650 per hour
Yep.
for the service because they theoretically could get that much if any insurance company in the market reimbursed at that rate.
It's ridiculous. And so you got hospitals that are a big part of the problem, particularly for-profit hospitals.
For-profit hospitals.
You have a for-profit, pharmacy system that is now, CVS is Aetna, right? There's vertical and horizontal integration happening all throughout the system. And we've got like basically 15 companies that own 90% of this market, right?
Essentially everything at one level or another.
Yeah. And so we need to chip away at different pieces of that because a single payer insurance program is going to run into my God, it's 1/6 of the economy and all the rest of this is for profit, right?
Right.
And everything collapses after that if we don't find a way of solving
I think
pieces of it.
I was reading something today. The U.S. spent $4.7 trillion on healthcare last year.
Yeah.
In a single calendar year. 4.7 trillion with a T.
We have a
dollars.
$29 trillion economy. So that's the piece of it. Our entire economy is $29 trillion, and that's what we just blew on healthcare. Yeah. The thing about Luigi and the assassination of Brian Thompson that strikes me is that almost everyone gets it on a visceral level. We talk about the healthcare spending in this country. We talk about the grift, the way that we're always getting fucked by the big guy, right? And right, left, and center, people kind of got it. Like,
outside of like pundits on TV and commentators whinging about how awful it was that everybody was making jokes and memes about a man dying, across the political spectrum, with very few exceptions otherwise, everybody just gets it.
My feed is very political on a number of different levels, right? You know, from centrists and moderates to experts in certain fields to, you know, libertarians to socialists to communists to right wingers. It's got a broad spectrum.
Same.
And I would say it's like 95% kind of, but somewhere between pro and, well, I get it.
Yeah.
Right? It's somewhere in there. And that's the thing. The MAGA voter, it frustrates me about them, is that they absolutely on a visceral level get that something is broken in our system. Now they think that there's a strong man daddy who's going to fix it. But they get that something's fucking broken.
Right.
And they have a type of class consciousness.
They're largely people who are previously politically entirely unmotivated. They didn't participate. They didn't care. They didn't see there as being a reason to get involved. And then they became hyper fanatical because even though their solutions to the problems are totally deranged,
right?
They're not wrong that there are problems there that need to be addressed.
Yeah. They get that there's something broken. And if we can bridge this divide, I don't know, by capping a few CEOs, great. but no, we gotta talk more, and we have to engage in different ideas. I wish that we could have more rational conversations with them. But maybe times like this are a good time for that.
If they could get past their knee-jerk, trigger the libs mentality and actually think and talk, because I see the comments I get on TikTok videos I post, and they're not just deranged, but very stupid.
Yes.
And poorly thought out, and a lot of people repeating the same dumb, mostly incoherent talking point over and over again, and becoming very convinced that I'm angry about what they've said to me in a way that I'm not, because I don't care.
No, your husband wears the pants in your relation. What the fuck off?
Sometimes they're bad enough at it that it kind of makes me sad for them. Like there's a level of pity.
Yeah.
Because I remember the early internet. You go back to like George W.'s first term in particular. I would argue with conservatives online all the time about policy, and it was great. We had really interesting, productive conversations, and when it did devolve to name calling, they were just as good at it as I was.
Yeah,
and it was fun.
God,
and they were funny.
Days. I miss 2004 to 2012, really.
Yeah.
Like that period, like that 8-year period where we could
through
just
Obama's first term.
Fight about politics and policy. Oh God, I miss it. I miss being able to have a policy debate with people. The thing that does bother me is that it seems that they lost the policy debate and just dug into tribalism, right? You know, we had the Kruger and Card, or the Kruger and Card work on minimum wage, etc. And every time you turned around, you kept finding more and more, data that backed a basic, form of interventionist government, right?
Yeah.
Not in a direct, like the war on terror and the war on fucking drugs are bad, but like, regulate this, give welfare to that, and the economy will be good, right?
Yeah.
And
like the real basic bare bones Econ 101 Keynesian stuff.
Right. And the right always said, nope, that's wrong. And Keynes and the Dem side said, that shit's right. And we had some natural experiments, and it tended to line in the other direction. So they gave up. They were like, fuck policy. We're just going to be fascists.
And they're really good at it.
They're really good at it.
They're really good at it. And fascism's easy.
But they got dumber, and it's offensive. Speaking of dumber and offensive, I guess that's our main news of the week. Let's get into the next segment.
All right. All right, let's get down to the meat of things this week. What are we talking about for our main topic today?
Oh, God. So, in the era of global kind of destabilization and the rise of your Donald Trumps, your invasion of Ukraine, your struggles over Taiwan, your instability in the Middle East, and your elections all across Europe, you see a couple of disparate threads, some very specific trends. And one of the biggest one is like Russian disinformation and influence campaigns, right? And when you take a step back, it starts to become kind of a clear pattern that this looks a lot like, what if instead of fighting with each other, the Axis played nice with the Allies, and the Allies more fringe right-wing internal movements like Lindbergh and the North American Bund and, you know, Henry Ford's, you know, love of Hitler. Like, what if they actually just started to take over a major political party instead of being, you know, laughed out of politics and saying, okay, we have to behave, right?
Right.
What instead if they took over a political party? And it's happening around the world. And I ask myself, you know, a lot of questions about it. And I say, what's at play here? And to me, it seems that it was the second Cold War. We just weren't paying attention.
Right.
The second Cold War was a digital space. It was an information space. It was China, Russia, the United States, Iran, Saudi Arabia playing games with each other over the internet and over social media. And the thing about it is American populism took a far right turn, and we got help. Or, sorry, not we. Russia and China got help from inside the house.
Yes.
Like,
And I'm not entirely surprised it happened. We've had such a demonization of anything that can be considered leftist political thought in the United States that the inevitable populism that was going to rise up was almost guaranteed to be weird, fringe, white, right-wing nonsense.
Exactly. But here's what we've got. So Russia focused on these projects like the Internet Research Agency and other strategically designed groups where their target was hacking, right? And misinformation and social media campaigns. And they focused on U.S. elections, but elections in Moldova, and election in Romania. Elections in Georgia. All their former satellite states. Before that, it was Ukraine. They were deeply involved in Ukraine, and that's
why everything fell apart 10 years ago in 2014.
Exactly. And that's how we get a Paul Manafort, a man who is directly tied to Putin's government and the oligarchs that they had left in charge in Ukraine, and the repressive crackdown and grift and corruption that was happening there, all with one man behind the scenes there, and that man just so happens to become the campaign manager and close ally of Donald Trump, right?
Right.
Their ties aren't secret. They're not hidden. You know, Donald Trump wanted to go, Russia's a hoax. But every time you turn around, there's, what 26 members of his campaign that were directly tied to the Russian government in some way, shape, or form. There were 30 people indicted for...
Manafort was convicted of being an undisclosed foreign agent, even though he was subsequently pardoned.
Right. Same with Mike Flynn. And you've got Roger Stone in contact with Guccifer, who just so happened to be just the FSB.
Yeah.
Right. And they're trying to get information and connections with Russian intelligence. It's not a secret. They did that. And you see that pattern, you realize, well, yeah, the guys who want power in their respective countries want a world where there isn't a global hegemony anymore.
Right. And that means taking us out.
It does.
Or
And
allowing us to take ourselves out. Because if there's one thing that has been true for the longest time, probably since the turn of the last century, before World War II, only the United States can topple the United States.
absolutely.
We are physically too far away from any other country that might want to do it, and we are too economically and politically powerful for anyone to do it to us without our consent.
Correct. But we've almost done it to ourselves on a few occasions.
We've come very close.
Yeah. And that's just it. You look at the pattern, it's like, well, and this is not an endorsement of global hegemony as far as the way it's been done, or American imperialism. You know, this is just to say we were starting to get into a world where people thought of an interconnected, universally positive, almost like an at least civilly liberal world that was tied through tourism and trade and travel and diplomacy and soft power. And we were starting to see more and more growth of things like the UN and NATO and trade deals like NAFTA. And it was a steady building towards a closer and closer interconnected world that was leaving places like Russia and China on the outskirts of it. Even with China becoming a large global economic power,
Right.
it was having to liberalize in order to play ball with the rest of the world.
Right.
It was in a position where it couldn't just keep maintaining an authoritarian status quo because, well, its population was, talking to and visiting and doing business with the United States and England and the Netherlands
You start seeing that's why oppressive regimes so often cut off their people from the internet, the outside world. They don't allow in information because they don't want their people to see how things are elsewhere under different systems.
Exactly. And so when you add all of that together, you see what's happening. They need us to be weak, right? And look, I'm going to say it. The tougher you try to get on these places, like China, for instance, the tougher you try to get on China as far as trade goes, the more it actually just weakens us. We're a consuming country, right? We buy stuff.
Right.
And
yeah, we don't people always talk about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, but largely we've outsourced the manufacturing of cheap disposable garbage.
right.
That is unskilled manufacturing, is manufacturing that even with the higher wages we tend to pay in the U.S. compared to a country like China, is still low wage manufacturing jobs. These are not good jobs,
Right.
by and large.
Yeah, if we were to bring that back to the United States, it'd be not much above minimum wage, and it would be more dangerous than the average job, and the price of every product we were selling would still have to go up by a lot. So you're not actually getting a cost savings to consumers. You're not generating millions of jobs. You're generating thousands, and you're creating, more industrial waste, more injuries and more difficulty. Like, economies go through stages, and China is going through its stage of industrialization into consumption and financialization, like we did.
There will come a time when China has to start outsourcing its cheap crap manufacturing to someone else.
Yeah,
And they're fast approaching that.
exactly. And that's now the funny thing is, we talk about going into a trade war with China, right? Because Donald Trump is going to be tough on China.
So tough. He's a tough man.
You know what country?
Tough dude.
You know what country's intelligence agencies invested in trying to get him and other Republicans elected in 2022 and 2024?
Who?
China.
China?
China,
Really?
yeah.
Really? You're telling me China prefers Donald Trump to be president of the United States over Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or anyone else?
Yeah, they did. In fact,
Who would have thunk that?
China's interference in 2024 utilized AI-generated content, made a bunch of anti-Semitic attacks. They had over 8,000 accounts that were on Twitter, which I'm going to dead name until Elon dies. It's fuck calling it X. It's not. It's Twitter.
No, it's Twitter. He didn't invent it. Just like he's never invented or created anything.
Yeah.
He's bought things and declared himself founder.
Yeah,
he has never invented anything.
Except maybe a weird form of new crypto fascism. He might be the vanguard of this new.
I think he's at the vanguard of promoting it, but he didn't create anything.
Fair. All right.
This was all people smarter and more duplicitous and conniving than him.
It's true.
Who got there first. And he's just limping along and trying to take the credit, which is his MO and always has been.
That's fair.
Since before he got the hair plug.
But that's just it. So we got China having over 8,000 Twitter bot accounts where they're pumping AI videos in support of Donald Trump.
And it's mostly slop that's easy to identify if you are in the mindset that you need to look for it and identify it.
Yeah, the Chinese were the sloppiest at it. Now, what they had an edge on was intelligence and information. And it looks like they were making sure that the right amounts of that were getting to the Internet Research Agency over in Russia and to certain parts of the Republican Party.
Right.
Which, again,
because there are members, currently seated members of the Republican Party, current elected officials who are, for the lack of any other term, foreign agents.
Yes.
They are working for foreign governments, not for you, not for the United States government, not for their constituents. They are working for Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm. And so even China, the one we're going to get tough on, was trying to get Donald Trump elected because they want, I mean, here's the thing. We go into a trade war with them, it hurts our economy for a little while. One of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to cave a bit and we're going to make a trade deal with them that's favorable on both sides, okay? Or we're not. And while it's going to hurt their economy in the long run, they, as a major exporter and not a major importer, are going to do a bunch more business with Europe and Africa while our economy shrinks, and it ends with them being more important.
Right. And it also gives them a potential in on the higher end manufacturing that we still do in the United States.
Correct.
That is high paying, good jobs.
Yeah, because when you put tariffs on all of the imports for the materials for that manufacturing,
the prices go up.
Yeah, which gives them an edge in trying to get into that space. So for China, it's win-win. It's not win-win for us. And that's why we see them jumping on board. And we see Saudi Arabia playing little games because they're not really an ally.
Never have been.
Never have been. They're jumping in on the bandwagon. They're playing both sides. They're being friendly with Russia and China because it's beneficial to them. And the weaker we are as a country, the better it is for them to maintain their stranglehold on, being a regional superpower. Right?
Right.
This is no-brainer shit. And Russia is trying to scoop up all of its former satellite states. You got the bullshit that's happening in Moldova, which currently has a pro-Western president, Maya Sandu, who won re-election on November 3rd.
By a very slim margin. And it
Yes.
was almost exclusively because of the Moldovan diaspora living abroad who voted almost lockstep for her.
Yeah. So here's the thing is she was supposed to win in a landslide. Like everything up until
The very end.
the very end was suggesting that she was doing incredibly well. And this major push came out. And now there is a large corruption scandal happening with a vote buying scheme.
Yeah.
Who's the stooge for Putin there?
Alexander Stoyanov, I believe.
Stoyanov. I love the
I
names.
fucking can't.
Eastern European
Eastern
names.
European names. I'm part Polish, but not that Eastern European.
My mouth don't move that way. But yeah.
What that mouth do? Not that.
Right. So you got this stooge there. You've got an oligarch trying to buy votes, something like 300,000 votes or $130 million influence campaign.
Right. And this is a small country with a small population.
Yeah.
100,000 votes is a lot.
Mm-hmm. And so quite literally trying to buy the election. And then here in the U.S., we've got
the entire debacle of Tenet Media.
yeah. Talk to me about it.
So Tenet Media was a media company started by Lauren Chen, Canadian, right-winger. She's been making really bad grifty content for at least 7 or 8 years, possibly longer. I don't know. But her and her husband started a Russian-backed media company based out of Tennessee. And what they would do is they would go to right-wing influencers in the media space, people like Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, and offer them exceptionally large sums of money for the rights to re-upload their content on the Tenet Media YouTube channel.
Okay.
The Tenet Media YouTube channel that got less than an average of 10,000 views per video, even though they were paying some of these figures in the neighborhood of $400,000 per month for the rights just to repost. And obviously, they were only reposting the video that gave a pro-Russian message that aligned with the Russian government's stated goals. And it just, if it wasn't direct collusion, it was definitely an influence campaign designed to get these creators to create more content that they could sell to Tenet for rebroadcast. Now, Tim Pool says he didn't know it was Russian money. Tim Pool is a very stupid man.
He is.
And I fully believe that that's possible.
Yeah. No.
I totally believe that he would genuinely just think that some random company from Tennessee would show up at his door with a $400,000 a month check and ask for rebroadcast rights, and he would just unironically and uncritically accept that at face value.
With no questions. He'd just be like, no.
He's a very stupid man. Even just watching his brief interactions with Sam Cedar over the last 4 or 5 years, he is shockingly bad at thinking.
Yeah, that's true.
He talks a lot and he talks fast, but everything he says is very dumb.
It is very dumb. Tim Pool is a whole special kind of ridiculous animal. I don't like to use this word very often, but the man's retarded.
Yeah, and I don't even know that he fully understands that he's grifting.
Yeah.
I don't know what he believes. I think he believes whatever happens to be coming out of his mouth at the moment.
Yeah.
I think he is entirely incapable of understanding that he says mutually exclusive, entirely contradictory things regularly. And that most of the time those contradictory things never make sense on their own independently of one another, contradicting one another.
Yeah. I mean, watching the rise of Tim Pool as he tried to make a buck being an Occupy guy.
Yeah.
And he was bad then.
He's bad at it.
He was bad at it.
There's no real money grifting from the left.
Yeah. Which, guys, everybody out there.
We'd like to change that.
We need to change that. So, if you would like to give us $400,000 a month,
we will let you repost this wherever you fucking please.
Yeah.
You can put it anywhere.
Now, if you have a slant, I'm not saying that we will adjust our content to match that slant, but I'm not saying it. So, if you give us $400,000 a month because you like our content,
we could have a very friendly relationship.
We could have a very friendly relationship. We could talk. Russia, if you're listening. So, no, but there's no money in...
There's no money in grifting from the left.
And but there are these massive piles of money for grifting from the left. And
it often feels
right.
like infinite cash is available if you are willing to just spout right-wing talking points.
And wherever there isn't infinite cash coming from within the United States, there's infinite cash coming from outside the United States for spouting right-wing talking points. And that's how you get Tenet Media, and that's how you get the Internet Research Agency and these massive influence campaigns going from... And how you wind up getting an entire political party wound up being bought by the Russian government, and the Russian government can't buy its own troops food.
Right. Which just says exactly how cheap it is to buy the Republican Party in the United States. It doesn't take much.
No, it does not. They're cheap.
Cheap dates. There's some cheap hookers.
And we had a political party sell its soul to an authoritarian strongman and to Russian talking points and to, giving up on supporting an ally that was invaded and is winning. Like, that's it. Guys, if you're pissed off about the foreign aid budget, boy, do I have some fucking news for you about the U.S. budget and our finances as a country. The billions of dollars going to Ukraine have not in any way, shape, or form cut into any amount of money that the government is going to give you.
Right. And it's we talk about it in terms of dollar values, but we're not giving them cash.
Right. They're getting a very small amount of cash.
Getting a very small amount of cash, but primarily we're giving them weapons that are obsolete for our needs that we're just going to sit in a warehouse somewhere.
Right.
So we've allowed them to have them to fight their little war.
They have a dollar value. And Ukraine is able to hold off our largest geopolitical rival, the big fucking bad of a 50-year period of time.
Yeah.
That
the scary guys we used to make movies about, like Red Dawn.
So we were afraid that this nation would invade us and take us over at any point for decades, right? That's where we were. And they have invaded their tiny neighbor. I mean, it's not actually tiny. Ukraine is like one of the largest countries in Europe, and it's massive. And so, but in comparison, it's tiny. Its economy is tiny. Its military was tiny. Its number of people in comparison was much smaller. And Russia is getting smoked in an invasion that they started and planned. They had a buildup of 200,000 fucking troops along their border.
We saw this coming for months.
Yeah.
Ahead of time.
Months. And they couldn't pull off their invasion. They are stalled. They are dragging ass. The Ukrainian counteroffensive was way more successful than Russia wanted it to be. And we're afraid that they're cutting into your fucking welfare budget, your 1 cent in taxes. Fuck you.
And I often see this.
Like, they're not hurting.
The one line I often see is like, we shouldn't spend X money on whatever while we still have homeless veterans here at home.
Like they give a shit.
They want to completely do away with the VA.
Yeah.
Entirely. Zero it out as if it never existed.
Did you not see their proposed cuts at the VA? Like, as just an idea, the amount that they think they can cut from the VA is more than half of its budget.
We could just provide housing to every military veteran for less than it costs to not provide housing and deal with the other services we have to provide because of it, because they are homeless.
Yeah. So the homelessness that exists in the U.S., and not just veterans, but veterans are a big chunk
part
of it.
Yeah.
But the increased healthcare costs for when they go to the ERs, the increased policing, and when we put them in jails for a night or a weekend or a month, when we do that because we're a brutal and inhumane country. The increased costs in making anti-homeless architecture so that they can't sleep
Which just
in places.
reduces the quality of all of our lives.
Right. So it reduces the quality of all of our lives. Because you ever tried to just chill on a park bench lately? Like, ow, oh,
You don't want to sit there for more than 10 minutes at a time because it's just physically uncomfortable.
Yeah, you can't lounge or relax or chill anymore there. And again, as somebody who grew up enjoying public services like parks and shit, you used to just go and lay on a park bench and enjoy the weather. You can't do that anymore. And so we've spent piles of money on that. We spend piles of money on arresting them. And then there's all of these programs for helping them out, but they're delivered through nonprofits and foundations so the government gives some grant money and private institutions give some money and you create layers of jobs down these networks, and they're all middle class and upper middle class jobs to have a complex of like charities out there. But when you add up all the dollars together, it's way more expensive than just solving the fucking problem.
It would not be particularly cost prohibitive to just give every single military veteran a 1-bedroom apartment.
No, not at all.
Build dormitory style housing.
We could do it.
Give them the option of like, you can live there if you need to, if you're going to be
They're used
homeless
to it.
otherwise. Here you go.
Like as
Like college all over again.
but it would be like being in the military all over again. As somebody who's been there, like that's so, you know, dormitory style housing and like, you know, sharing housing in, you know, a contained environment is not unheard of. Right? So, but that's the world that we're in, where this nonsense, and they tell us that spending money on something that is geopolitically and strategically very useful to us on the one side, right, is hurting us and stopping us from solving this problem that we have no intention of fucking solving on the other side.
No.
And it's angering. And you know what? Do you want them to solve homelessness? Make them solve homelessness, right? And if they won't, Luigi Mangione, the fuckers, all right? Like, it's time that we actually start dealing with these problems and stop letting them have these rhetorical fucking fights, right? Like where they, you know, play these games.
Especially when all of the rhetorical fights are in bad faith.
Yeah.
All the time.
Like
there's not a single Republican official who is interested in spending government money to actually solve a social problem.
No. And
at any level of government.
And so what are we here for, guys? And like, do you really want homelessness? Do you really want all these social problems just festering? No, none of us do. And we all know that something's broken. And now here we are, like when we finally got to the precipice of being able to do something about it because the American population was by and large okay with it, then we all decided that, you know, one party needed to be influenced by the Russian government, so we tear ourselves apart. And they bought it. It's gross.
It is fascinating to see the particularly the two generations who were most inundated with Cold War propaganda. Your baby boomers and Gen X are the ones who have fallen for the most Russian propaganda in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Just dove right in
and
head first and they're just swimming in it.
Yeah, and I get like how their propaganda is focused is on like picking their a priori biases and being like, here you go, you're right.
Right.
But look, if an authoritarian government that is invading its neighbors and doesn't have free elections is telling you you're right, you're not. You're not right.
You're not right.
You're not right in the fucking head if you think you're right. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Like this is the game and you're losing. You're giving them the win. It's disgusting.
All right, guys. You know what time it is. Time for you to read a goddamn book.
Oh, man.
All right. I know. So I've got another short story suggestion for this week.
Okay.
This is a fun one. I love it. It is a sci-fi story from an author that we do not think of for sci-fi stories.
Okay.
My pick this week is The Jaunt by Stephen King.
Okay.
It is the story of a family who, in the future, when teleportation has become the primary mode of travel between the planets, is getting ready to go on vacation to Mars. And they're getting ready to transport. And the father makes it very clear to the son that you have to be asleep when you transport. No one knows why. They just know that every time they've tried to transport somebody who wasn't asleep, bad things happen on the other end. And this piques the kid's curiosity. So even though he's put in the chamber and they put in the gas that makes him sleep, he holds his breath so he can be awake for the teleportation trip, which they call the jaunt. And it does not go well for this young man. I don't want to give anything away.
Awesome.
But it is a good story. It's a short story. like all Stephen King short stories, it's got the punch of a really well told joke.
Nice.
Just gets in, punches you right in the chest, and leaves you wishing that he had delved more into science fiction because it's not something that he did a lot of.
Fair, yeah.
It's a short story too. You can read it in 10 minutes.
I do like with King. I do like the way that like certain things like mix between science fiction and like horror fantasy, like the Dark Tower stuff. But how that
and especially the way that overlaps with everything he's ever written.
right? So that's kind of fun. I wish he would have stepped more into sci-fi because he's
good at it when he does it.
Right.
It's very, very infrequent.
And he had a mind for it. So because I'm me, I'm going to go with something by Orwell because why not?
But I thought he was a snitch.
Oh God. Well, look. All right. So we're going to go into that one real quick. All right. So Orwell's list.
Let's put this one to bed.
Let's put this one to bed. So Orwell's list. So do I like it? I don't know. Do I love it? I don't know. Here's my position on it. Orwell was very anti-authoritarian, and he survived the Spanish Civil War, and he fought on the side of the Catalonians, and the anarchist left. Joseph Stalin fucked those guys, and he fucked them hard.
Yep.
And then he fucked his own people. And Orwell did not in any way, shape, or form like Joseph fucking Stalin or anything that had to do with Joseph fucking Stalin for good fucking reason. So that happened. And then Stalin was paying a bunch of people in Britain to be spies and shit. And Orwell was asked by close members of the left-wing party, the left-wing party who had fucking spies in their party that they knew they had spies. Hey, is there anyone that you can think of that's a problem? And he gave a couple of names. Do I love it? I don't know.
And he was right for the most part.
Yeah.
He named people who were actual paid spies for Russia.
That's also true. So,
and these weren't people who were arrested or
no, very few consequences happened from it.
The primary consequence was they were watched, and they did not get some promotions that would have put them in places where they would have had access to more sensitive information than they already had.
Correct. And some of them already had access to information that was way too sensitive and were funneling it to Russia. And because they happen to be nobility, the fucking government let them go. Right? So, aggravating. But Orwell, all right. So, this is on Shooting an Elephant, which is somewhere kind of a space between a short story and an essay from his own experience.
Okay.
He wrote it based around his time when he was serving in Burma, I believe, with the British military. And its themes are about, imperialism and how his views of imperialism were formed. It's about the conqueror and the conquered, and he uses the elephant as a bit of a proxy, but also the social structures that he's in as the conqueror among the conquered, and the conscious, and having a conscience. And those are the kind of themes that he delves into. And it's a really interesting read. It helps you kind of understand what made Orwell, and why he had the views on imperialism and power that he did. And so, understanding that about one of the best writers on said topic in the history of humanity is a good idea, because maybe you out there, the audience, will get an idea of what the dynamic between power is and learn something.
Yep. You can never learn too much.
Right.
You should never stop learning either.
Please don't. Don't stop learning. But also, if you're going to stop learning not to give us all your money, and
give us all your money.
Give us all your money.
I think on that, we should end.
Yeah.
The most important note of the week. You giving us your money.
Give us your money.
Give us your money.
Goodbye.
Until next time.